we are now live, Zamil. We are live on stage. What we're going to do, everyone, is we've seen the numbers have just started going up quite a lot in the last 30 seconds. So we're going to give it a little bit more time, just allow a few others join on stage with us. And then we'll be commencing the webinar topics shortly. So Zamil, you're looking forward to presenting tonight?
Super stoked to be here, Matt. So just a shout out to the attendees at the moment. While we wait to start up, if you haven't got a pen and paper already, quickly duck off and grab something to make some notes on. We're going to be developing an action plan and all that, and some other things throughout the next half an hour to 45 minutes as well to get you eScript ready. So, but yeah, Matt, super stoked. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's our first webinar, so I can see our attendee list is looking at, I think at the moment we've got 60 odd attendees on here, and we'll hopefully get a few more on in the next couple of minutes. So I'm pretty excited, first one with BD and with yourself, and what we want to do with these is just deliver some value and some education to everyone out there.
That's great.
All right, what are we up to now? I reckon, should we start? We should kick that off. I reckon we kick that off now, things off now, Zamil.
Yep, let's do it. Sounds great.
So, look, firstly, I just wanted to start by saying thank you to everyone for attending on the webinar tonight. This is going to be the first of many webinars we're looking to bring you over the next year ahead and hopefully more. A few housekeeping rules for tonight. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, you'll see to the right of your screen, there's a little questions tab. You can post any questions in there that you wish. So what we'll do with that there is being mindful of everyone's time tonight, and we've allocated 45 minutes to this. We know everyone is busy, especially this time of day. What we want to do, we're going to try and get through as many as we can during this webinar session. However, for the ones that we cannot get through, Zamil and the team or I will reach out to you afterwards to answer your posted question if we didn't get a chance to answer it throughout this webinar. Secondly, we'll be holding polls throughout the webinar tonight. So Zamil's got a few questions that he wants to help out with the presentation, and we'll be polling the audience just to make sure that we're on the right track and to deliver you as much value as we can tonight. And so lastly, let's introduce Zamil. So Zamil is our guest speaker tonight. He is an award-winning pharmacist, and he's sold his pharmacy at age 33 for 3 times the pharmacy average multiple. So Zamil, look, I know I've had plenty of times and I've met with Zamil and spoken to him. He's a world of knowledge, and using his past experiences, he's taken the next steps to helping healthcare professionals transform their businesses. So I'm not going to be talking anymore. I'm going to open up the floor to Zamil to talk about e-prescriptions with everybody.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for the introduction and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday evening, or if you're in WA with Matt in the late afternoon. So let's get into it. E-prescriptions, the beginning of a digital dispensary. Now, before I kick off into the agenda, I'd love to quickly gauge your mindset. So how many of you are excited or apprehensive about e-prescriptions? Because you see a poll quickly pop up. I'd love to get your feedback quickly about that. So Maria is going to just pop that question up shortly.
And guys, as well, this This is a live webinar, so we might have some technical difficulties from time to time, but overall we expect it to run pretty smoothly. So Maria has just loaded that poll to the right-hand side of your screen. I'll hand it back to Zamil.
Thanks for that, Matt. So, excited or apprehensive? What's your mindset right now at the start of this webinar? Love to gauge your thoughts. Alrighty, Maria, what's the numbers looking at?
So Zamil, I can see currently we are almost a dead split. We've got 57% of the attendees that have voted excited, and 4% are apprehensive about e-prescriptions.
Fantastic. So about roughly a 50-50 split. So I just noticed as well a question pop up from Simon about the contents and if we're going to be recording this webinar. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that there will be a recording available, but just a big disclaimer at the moment is that e-health and e-prescriptions are rapidly changing. There's a lot of moving parts with this. This is the first time it's happening in this country. And until the Go launch date, which is coming up very, very soon, there's new information coming out almost daily about this. So this presentation is current, the best of my knowledge as of now. If you jump on tomorrow, there might be some other news popping out, but just be aware of that. So if you are looking at this webinar in about a week's time, just be aware that it might be slightly outdated. So just be aware of that. But the other point I'd love to make is thank you so much for joining us. Close to 150 people registered to join us this evening. And a lot of you have supplied us with questions that have helped us guide what content to deliver to you this evening. So as you'll see, what we'll cover, 4 main things came out of those questions is what actually are e-prescriptions, planning your workflow and how best to maximize the changes in workflows required to accommodate e-prescriptions, the opportunities it presents, and also the consequences of not implementing it or getting it wrong. From those 4 points, we're going to develop an action plan that is tailored for you to make sure that you are eScript ready. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll also cover off some Q&A. So I value your time, so let's get stuck into it. Now, the hot action items that we'll be looking at, which I just quickly mentioned, is going to pop up at the end of each section. Now, these are going to be quick action points that you need to address by the 30th of May to be eScript ready. Now you need to frame these in the format of SMART goals. So they need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. And once you've completed these items, you are then eScript ready. But if you haven't yet grabbed some pen and paper, please do so ASAP, and we'll get into it. A little bit about me. So thank you, Matt, for the introduction. As Matt mentioned, been in pharmacy a long time. I was actually raised in pharmacy as an infant. My mother was also a pharmacist, and she was out in the front. I was in the back of the pharmacy in Melbourne, then moved to Brisbane when I was about 3. During my 3rd year university studies, I planned and project managed the construction of a brand new pharmacy, and then later became a partner in that pharmacy in 2011. So between 2011 and 2019, I grew the turnover of that pharmacy by almost $2 million and was nominated as a finalist for last year's Guild Pharmacy of the Year award. Soon after that, I sold it for 3 times the industry average multiple. And now I work with amazing health entrepreneurs and pharmacy owners and their teams to ensure and help ensure their businesses succeed and thrive by focusing on 5 key pillars. So mindset, leadership, planning, marketing, and sales. And I particularly specialize in workflow, process automation, and system implementation. All right, let's kick into the agenda. So what are e-prescriptions? So instead of issuing a paper prescription to the patient by hand, so as you can see there on the diagram there, you've got your prescriber on the left-hand side. Currently, a paper prescription gets issued to the patient. Now, e-prescriptions are going to be an additional offering to the patient, so not a replacement of paper prescriptions, but an additional offering to patients, where the prescriber will issue them with an electronic QR token prescription via app SMS, or email directly to the patient. Now, it is important to know that the patient will always have the choice which pharmacy they go to. So as shown in that diagram there, the prescriber sends it to the patient then gives it to the pharmacy. Now, in times of like following prescriptions or where a telehealth consultation might occur, those sorts of times where the prescriber may then issue that pharmacy to the pharmacy though of the patient's choice. So it is always the patient's choice as to which pharmacy that prescription will go to. So there was some discussion in the media and by some peak pharmacy health bodies, which highlighted the possibility of prescription channeling. This aims to negate that. You'll see in the bottom there as well that there's an active script list registry. Now, with that, also known as the ASL, we're not going to really delve into that tonight. That's something due to come out in the next 3 to 6 months. But simply though, this will allow patients to present to the pharmacy without a token or prescription, just with their ID. So that might be the driver's license and Medicare card, where the script would then be retrieved by the pharmacist from the cloud directly. So currently, like I mentioned, there are the paper-based prescriptions. Now, these form the legal document, okay? Now, the paper prescription currently is either issued by hand or by post to the patient, but instead, the QR code is actually not technically the legal document. It is the information contained in the cloud or the prescription delivery service that is the legal document. Now, the patient has the choice from a prescriber to opt into getting an electronic prescription like the token model here shown, or the paper prescription. However, once that's issued by the doctor, that's it. They cannot jump between either or. So if repeats are issued, as in this example here, you've got in the token model here, 12 supplies remaining. That patient then can't go back and request the pharmacist to issue them with paper repeats or vice versa. So something very important to note. If the QR code or the paper prescription is lost, like currently, the patient would need to go back to their prescriber and get a new script issued. So why? Why has this all come about? So a couple of years ago, the Australian Digital Health Agency, or ADHA, started on the journey to deliver the 7 steps of the National Digital Health Strategy with the launch of the My Health Record. The e-prescriptions form part of that roadmap and actually forms the 4th step of this journey under the medicines safety arm. Now, we've all experienced the increased pressures of COVID-19 on our workflows and the ability for patients to easily access medications. A big part of that has been the embracing of telehealth by doctors very, very quickly, and actually allowed the government to fast track something that's taken over 10 years to approve in around just 10 days. So paper prescriptions, unfortunately, do offer less security, are easily lost, and need to be physically presented at some point. But I, for one, am definitely looking forward to no longer handling those wet prescriptions or those things that might be covered in some unknown substance. And that brings me to that last point on the slide, is that not only does it increase patient safety and convenience, but it actually increases the safety of your team. So you can use either a handheld 2D barcode reader or simply turn your barcode reader around and engage with the patient in a contactless environment. So who is this best for? This is best for simple care patients with a low number of medical conditions and medications, or 0 or low number of repeats. Now, you might be wondering, well, why? Why is it just best for these patients? You know, I was hoping to use it for aged care patients, for complex care patients, for those with multiple medications, and Webster PAC patients with reduced cognitive ability. Now, currently, as the framework stands, is every time a repeat is issued, the patient will get an individual QR code for that script. So you can imagine someone in aged care or a complex care patient, and there are many different medications that have got multiple comorbidities, and you're sending them back and forth multiple individual tokens to their device or by email, they're going to get pretty confused. So this all comes down to how repeats are handled as part of this process. Now, there is some software that does allow to manually turn this off, but at the end of the day, that QR code is designed to eventually end up either to a patient's mobile device or in their email inbox. So the way around that is going to be the launch of the ASL, but also aged care digital charts are coming out and other systems and processes which will help to address those issues. But for now, that's for those first 3 points. So when is this going to launch? In 3 days' time, subject to local state and territory legislation. States that have a solid real-time prescription monitoring service, such as Victoria, will be the first ones to go live in this. And you may have seen in the media recently that there are a couple of vendors that have tested e-prescriptions and the processes live in Victoria with the prescribers and dispensers. However, it's really important to note that don't panic. So you might be thinking, oh my God, there's only a few days till this actually pops up. Now, while eScript readiness is critical by this stage, currently only a handful of live pharmacies are currently testing the platform, and not all dispensing and prescribing software is actually ready to go at the moment. From the dispensing side, Fred, Minfos, and Zed Dispense are definitely all ready to go, having reportedly passed compliance. And for doctors, if you interact with doctors or have a surgery yourself, best practice, which is used by around 1,500 surgeries across Australia, and ZedMed have just announced that they are also ready to go. Now, if you're wondering if your doctors are ready to go and going to be supporting eHealth, look up your top doctors list and see if there's a handful of local surgeries that contribute to a significant volume of your prescriptions. Contact them, see what they're doing, work out common solutions with them, and gauge how eScript ready they are and what they propose to do by the 30th of May deadline as well. The other point to note is that there's actually been no public patient training or information launched by the ADHA, or Australian Digital Health Agency, till now. Like, it's still not even launched yet. So working personally with the team for the My Health Record training, where we trained patients and pharmacists, this gave us a really good indication as to how eScript readiness is actually going to be. So there's been a lot of training by the ADHA on for prescribers and dispensers, but nothing for patients yet. So regardless of the 30th of May full go live date, don't expect to get hammered from day one with e-prescriptions. However, for early adopters, it is critical that you are still ready. So just manage that though with your team, and don't expect, oh my God, we're going to get smashed as of day one. But you do need to be ready for those early adopters, because that is your opportunity to be known as the go-to pharmacy for e-prescriptions and to form really good advocates to your pharmacies rather than detractors. Alrighty, so first hot action item. So out of those 4 key points, I'm going to give you a minute here right now to jot down the key points from each of those steps there that your team needs to know, starting with the what, the why, the who, and the when. So take a minute here right now. We're going to essentially turn these 4 points into a pitch. That's going to form your pitch to not only your team to help train your team, but also enable your team to then empower your patients with the knowledge of this process as well. So I'm going to give you roughly another 20 seconds.
And we've got a few questions as well, Emil. So
yeah, sure.
Put those through at the end, or?
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think let's thank you so much. Keep posting those questions throughout the presentation. You might find that some of them do get answered along the way, but Matt and Maria are collating the questions, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end, but please do keep popping them up.
Yes, we've got quite a few good questions that have popped up actually as well, which I'm quite looking forward to asking you at the end.
Yeah, fantastic. Alrighty, so got that down, those 4 points, and then you're going to turn that into your pitch. Let's keep going. So this is what the typical eScript token workflow would look like. That's, I guess, a little picture illustrating that. But before we dive into the workflow and into the planning process of that, my next poll, which dispensing software do you currently use? Is it Fred? Is it Minforce? Is it Z Dispense? Or is it another platform?
So we've put that across in the polls, everyone. And it looks like, Zamil, the numbers are changing pretty quick. It's
They are.
It's head and head at the moment between Fred and Z Dispense. So Fred seems like the most popular software at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. So, yep, Fred's tracking around 50%, and the remaining mixes up with Z Dispense following suit. So, depending on your dispensing software, your workflow might be slightly different. And particularly with Fred, you would have heard from them about MedView Flow. So this is probably a critical component to consider when working out which workflow processes you're going to implement. Minforce, I see at roughly about 10%. They've supported a paper system where you scan the QR code on the scripts in process and then put that paper version of that into the basket. And Z Dispense actually has a really cool internal queuing system. And if you don't know about any of those systems, reach out to your software vendors and they'll be definitely able to assist you with that. But we're going to dive now into the token workflow. So as this picture shows, starting off with your prescriber on the left, they then issue the QR code to the patient via mobile or SMS or email. That patient then takes it into the pharmacy, which I guess represents the scripts in process. That then moves on to the dispensing and then the scripts out process, where repeats are then sent back to the patient electronically and the medications are handed out. So, planning your workflow. So the scripts in process, in my opinion, is the most critical time to ensure that your patient is going to have the most positive experience in your pharmacy. Unlike a paper prescription, there's actually absolutely no way of knowing whether or not the token is actually valid just by looking at it. So right now with a paper prescription, you'd look at the date, you'd see maybe last dispensing and make sure that it's maybe out of the 20-day rule. And there's other few different checks that you might perform. But if you're accepting a QR code or an electronic prescription without checking its validity first, you open up yourself to very poor patient experiences later on. We've all experienced this. You've taken in a script, that patient's then being kept waiting 10 or 15 minutes, and then you go back to the patient and pretty much explain to them, look, your script's out of date, or there's no stock, or a number of different reasons. Now that becomes a really tense point and completely ruins the patient experience. It turns it very quickly into something negative that could be handled and addressed at that scripts in process. But to avoid this problem, your scripts in process must involve scanning the token at some point, either directly into the dispensing software or itself, or into a queuing system like MedView Flow or Z Dispense's internal queue system. Now, once scanned, the patients will identifying data and script information will populate. And the scripts in technician or the pharmacist needs to review this and confirm it in the dispensing software, not a third-party software like MedAdvisor, GuildCare, or Script. So currently, if you're subscribed to the My Health Record, you'd know this. The 5 key patient identifiers to upload information into the My Health Record, but this is also required now to download these electronic prescriptions as well. So these are the Medicare or the DVA number, the patient's first name, their surname, their gender, and the date of birth. However, to send them their repeats, you also need to make sure that you capture their mobile number and or their email address. Patients will also be able to send you their token via their app, SMS, or email address. Now, for emails, I would highly recommend that you have a dedicated dispensary email address that can be easily accessed by your entire team. I find the best way to do this is to use Gmail and install a Chrome extension called Checker Plus, which actually allows you to be notified when you receive a new email in your web browser and can be synced to all of your computers. So if Dispensary 1, for example, reads and actions that email, it will mark it as dispensed on the other terminals as well. You can also use this if you use eFax as well, which is a great tip as well. Lastly, with most pharmacies using a basket or container for the scripts and medication, how will you identify the patient throughout the rest of the process? It's important to note that the token won't have any clear patient identifiers, unlike a paper script, which has the patient's full name, their address, even date of birth, and other identifiers, but the token won't have that information. So while a basket numbering system may help your internal flow, you need to ensure that the patient knows this number as well. But even that idea is a little bit half-baked, because how many times do you fill out on that scripting pad and you've got a serial number and you hand that patient the docket and then they come back and they've lost that docket? So maybe pairing an address label, I'd recommend printing off an address label with the numbered basket and clipping that to the basket to help your scripts and process, so that basket is very clearly identified for that particular patient. So that's covering off the scripts and process. The dispensing process. So in my view, there are three models of dispensing. Firstly, there's traditional, where you have a dispensary technician or pharmacy assistant taking in and giving out scripts at the front with minimal interaction by the pharmacist. Then now you might have noticed that I've used two different terms here, limited forward and true forward. So the difference, in my opinion, is limited forward is where a dispensary technician dispenses at the scripts and counter, but then takes the script away from the patient and that interaction with the patient to a pharmacist to be checked. So there's a bit more interaction by a pharmacist, but not as much as could be, but definitely more than the traditional model. However, you might be going, well, look, I employ robotics, I've got automation. Yeah, I've definitely got a forward dispensing model. Let me pitch this to you. There's plenty of pharmacies out there who employ robotic automation, but still have their pharmacists tucked away from patients. So you walk into a lot and you're still greeted by a dispensary technician or a pharmacy assistant, and you see in the back room there, tucked away, are the pharmacists checking or dispensing themselves and still having limited interaction with patients. However, true forward dispensing is where there are more pharmacists than dispensary technicians performing both the scripts in and dispensing process, all while interacting with the patient. This leads to high levels of engagement with a pharmacist. So quick poll here, which model of dispensing do you use? Traditional, limited forward, or true forward dispensing? Well, this is great. Most of the pharmacies here are using some sort of forward model. Yeah, fantastic. So about 20% are using a traditional model. So 1 out of 5. So yeah. So if you're using either a limited or true forward dispensing model, then you'll find that your scripts in and dispensing process actually forms part of the same process. They're kind of intertwined because the person taking in the script is then kind of dispensing it. The basket isn't really shifting hands too often. So when using a truly forward dispensing model, though, you're in the best possible position to adapt and use this technology by simply scanning each code, then dispensing it. Now, you might be wondering why I mentioned now who this is best for, is because you can imagine the process of taking someone's phone, scanning the script, dispensing it, and scanning another QR code from that phone, then dispensing it. So for 2 or 3 scripts, that would work out great because you've taken that patient's phone or they've scanned it for you with your barcode reader. You've dispensed one script, and while they're finding the next QR code, they can then, that gives you time to dispense that medication, then they can scan at that time as well. That also allows you to have a great conversation and interact with the patient as well. But if you're using a limited forward dispensing model, regardless of whether or not you have robotic automation, my question is, why don't you have a pharmacist interacting with the patient more? Have you actually explored what the pain points are? Are there some limitations in your workflow which actually prohibit that? How can you address that? Because there would be a reason why that you've implemented a forward dispensing model, particularly if you've got some form of automation, but you might not be getting the best out of it. So reviewing that and finding out how you can best support your team to embrace the need to do this, particularly with eScripts coming out, is critical as well. So use this as an opportunity to review and reflect on those workflows. However, if you fall into that category, and it's jumped up to about 27% now, if you're using a traditional dispensing model though, unfortunately, you will need to invest the most time with your team to strategically plan for this change. Look at the dispensing software you use, review what workflows they recommend, and simulate how this would work from both sides as a patient and your team. So get your team together and role play it out. Get someone be a patient, get your dispensing team to get involved and see where the break in workflow might occur, all those pain points as well, and discuss it as a team to develop solutions for that. It's important to note though that due to the rushed rollout of this, nearly all of the software platforms have a really clunky workflow when it comes to dispensing e-prescriptions. So just be aware of that. And in most cases, and pretty much with all dispensing software, handling mixed baskets also adds another layer of complexity to that. So by mixed baskets, I mean a basket of patients presented with both electronic prescriptions and paper scripts. Now, this will ultimately require the use of an electronic queuing system to help track this. If your workflow has a checking pharmacist in particular, so you've got a rack of dispensary technicians next to you and all the baskets are coming to maybe one or two checking pharmacists, they will need to have their own dedicated computer or screen to actually perform their checking process as well. So right now, they would check off a paper script. That token isn't going to show the information they need. They'll need to check off a screen. So you need to review that in your workflow as well. The other point that I really want to hit home with this is make sure that your team are medication scan checking at every single dispensing process. So while mandatory in some states, it's not mandatory in all of them. However, most, if not all of your dispensing platforms allows you to check the scan rates of your team. And I'd be doing this regularly, ensuring that this gets done rather than relying on anecdotal evidence that this is actually being achieved. You'll be quite surprised at the percentages of your team and where some team members actually perform really well, but where some actually aren't doing so well with that. This also has great impacts on your inventory management as well. So really good idea to make sure that your team are doing this. The other point that I'd like to touch on with this though is that there's going to be change. With any change will come added stress and pressures to your team. So planning to minimize dispensing errors is critical, and a big part of that is actually product scan checking. Schedule 8 medications, we had some questions come up about this. So within the current framework of e-prescriptions, Schedule 8 medications can be prescribed and dispensed using the token model. However, in nearly all states and territories, this is still to be legislated, so I'd stick with paper scripts for now until you're told by your local state or territory that they've changed or updated the legislation to allow it. Okay. Scripts out process. So the last step.
I've just got as well, so very relevant.
Yeah, so the scripts out process is definitely a critical component, obviously, to close off the interaction and the transaction. However, you need to now ensure that you are matching the medications to the right patient. You know that recently PDL actually reported a startling statistic that 10% of the incidents reported to them actually involve handing out the medications to the wrong patient. So we've all got those yes patients that sort of say yes to everything. You know, someone calls out Mrs. Smith's name and Joe Blogs there goes yes to it. The best way to avoid that is by using open-ended questions such as, what is your address? Or do you mind confirming your address for me? Rather than, is this your address? And then you could use that to match it to the basket identifier or the electronic queuing system and the information in that to make sure that you're giving out that medication to that right patient. Proof of receipt. Now, traditionally with paper prescriptions, now you may have stopped this with COVID happening, but the patient signs. They sign, which actually is an acknowledgement that they've received that medication. There's going to be no signing now with tokened prescriptions. So you need to make sure that each patient is receiving some sort of a till docket or some sort of proof of purchase to make sure that that medication is issued to them and that they have a receipt of that. However, when handling special orders, you need to have a robust special orders register that tracks all stages of this process so that you don't have any disputes about if a medication has been issued or not. It's important to note that repeats, so right now the workflow is so you, at the scripts out process, you charge the patient and you hand back the repeats. Now, handling the repeats within e-prescription model actually gets done a little bit differently. So as soon as you press that enter key at the end of each dispensing, that repeat is then electronically sent to the patient then and there. So you find that some patients might call back in a day, in a week, or whenever for some medications, and they're already getting their repeats. So this can cause some confusion to some patients. So pay particular attention to this in your workflow and be sure to explain this to your patients as well. Claim management. Right now, you don't send your paper prescriptions to Medicare. There's no foreseeable change with claims at the moment. You would just use your software like normal. But most importantly now, closing out the interaction and finalizing the transaction needs to leave a positive experience for the patient, as there's nothing now tying them to your pharmacy anymore. So with QR codes, it is held in the cloud, it is in their mobile device, regardless of scripts on file. There's nothing now tying them to your patient. And we're going to touch on a little bit more about that very shortly as well. So next top action item. I need you to identify your single most urgent workflow consideration to review from each step. So the scripts in process, the dispensing process, and the scripts out process. Now, I'm conscious of time. If you don't get through this all in the allocated next about 30 seconds that I'm going to give you, don't stress, you can always come back to that. So your single most urgent workflow consideration to review from each step. So you're going to use this in your next team huddle, your next team meeting, and your workflow review processes with your team. Particularly with your, and you might find that this slightly changes when you do the role playing as well. Okay. All right, moving on. So e-prescriptions offer a plethora of opportunities to the patient, to not only the patient, but to the pharmacy as well. So not only is it increasing convenience and safety to the patient, but it allows you to streamline, eventually will allow you to definitely streamline your workflow and processes so that you are spending more time interacting with the patient. Now, the benefit of the electronic token model is that it's going to download all of the data, including a mobile number and or an email address, into your dispensing software. And that's a great segue, particularly during the scripts in process, is to start talking about scripts on file opportunities, but most importantly, the app services. So the app in itself is going to probably be your biggest loyalty driver over scripts on file from now on. So using a patient medication adherence platform, such as MedAdvisor, GuildCare, or Script, is going to be critical now to do this. But you can also look at some other things as well. So are they coming into your pharmacy in a work uniform? Are they from a place nearby, or do they reside nearby? Do they appear rushed or stressed? So looking at these nonverbal cues can lead to many opportunities by simply providing them with a solution to their apparent problem, even if the patient doesn't recognize that there actually might be one. So a personal experience, and something that I really encourage you to do and found beneficial, was actually by following these nonverbal cues and identifying how I can best support a patient. So I had someone who was working in our center where my pharmacy was, and they came in around lunchtime. They appeared to be rushed and a bit stressed. I then offered them our Scripts Ready service paired with our app and explained the benefits to them and the time that it would save them off their lunch break. So it would save them about 10 minutes off their lunch break each time they needed to come into the pharmacy. I then realized that after chatting with them, that they were actually the owner of the business as well within the mall. And so I offered to perform their flu vaccinations for their entire team and prepare a 30-minute presentation at their next team meeting about keeping healthy and well over the winter period. Now, they were wrapped with that because obviously sick leave and personal leave kind of spikes during these cooler months when we've got cold and flus coming out, the influenza season, and even now with COVID, there's a lot happening at the moment. I then realized that this worked really well, so I repeated this process with a few other local businesses, and all of a sudden, I started getting calls, inbound calls, hitting me up to perform the same services. So by turning what was seemingly a single $10 transaction, this translated into thousands of dollars worth of revenue. So when you hear the term complete health solutions, this is exactly it. It is not just about a companion selling product. You need to think bigger outside the four walls of your pharmacy and how you can actually truly achieve this for not only your patients, but their communities and the businesses that they interact with and you interact with as well. So on the screen here, you see a list of different opportunities that you could look at. And I seriously encourage you to look at whatever opportunities that might present itself out of this. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to give you 30 seconds to brainstorm your own opportunity and the single greatest one that is that you can capitalize on right now, starting tomorrow. So 30 seconds for that. What's your opportunity hot action item? Alrighty. And the final point here, consequences. So unfortunately, if you do not get this right the first time with the patient, particularly a new patient, don't expect that patient to return, because patients now expect a lot more from us. And with the plethora of options now available, including e-commerce and home delivery, you really only have one shot leaving a positive impression. Scripts on File is no longer a guarantee of loyalty. So for years, we've been trying to build up our Scripts on File business. And if you haven't, well, now really you need to capitalize on these next 3 to 6 months and start using the app-based platforms that will help to continue to drive patients to your individual pharmacy. Once ASL rolls out, the active script list, patients can simply go anywhere. So now's the time over the next 3 to 6 months to build up your loyal patient database. And with larger format discount models already having robust customer relationship management e-commerce tools, you need to look at ways in which you are going to set yourself apart. And no, the answer is not just about great customer service anymore. Like I mentioned in the opportunities, you need to think bigger than that. If you're not ready by the 30th of May as well, and patients do come in with eScripts, you'll inevitably lose the rapport in your community and with your doctors, because if doctors or patients don't see you as being ready or proactive in this, especially for early adopters that like to spread the word about the latest and greatest things, that's going to leave a really negative impression on your pharmacy. And you need to be the go-to pharmacy, because at the end of the day, the patient journey ends with you, and that's the impression they're left with. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds now. Final hot action item, identify your single greatest threat to your business that you need to create a solution for between now and being eScript live. So I do very much appreciate that we're sitting at about 7:15 Brisbane time. Only a few more things and we're going to then jump on to Q&A. So thank you so much for sticking around. So your hot action item. But like I mentioned, at the end of the day though, this all comes down to your team and patient experience, okay? And the experience that you as a leader and your pharmacy will offer. So as Steve Jobs says, you have to start with the customer experience and work back towards the technology, not the other way around. So focusing on the 5 key pillars I mentioned before, look, you need to understand the mindset of your pharmacy team. Are they mentally prepared for more work? There's been a lot going on lately. Are they prepared to run with these changes and onboard them and be positive about that? What is their mindset like? As a leader, what training are you offering to your team? And do you lead by example with recruiting patients for your app services and the other services you offer? But planning is probably the biggest component of this. There's a big difference between being eScript enabled and eScript ready. And now's the time to plan out your next 3 to 6 months with your key team members and how you are going to address the current and upcoming changes. From a marketing point of view, how are you educating and marketing to your patients about these changes? What opportunities are you presenting that enables you to stand out against your competition? And from a sales perspective, how are you converting someone seeking just convenience or price to a truly loyal, engaged, and advocating patient? So what opportunities are you capitalizing on? So I'm going to start to finish up quickly with this checklist for you. And if you need a copy of this checklist, happy to send it to you. Notice here, though, I've broken it up into 2 different categories, enabled and ready. So enabled, they're very different to being ready. So you can have all the systems and tools in the back end. By being particularly ready, that involves having your team trained, your workflows reviewed, your doctors engaged, and your patients informed. So your action plan. You need to compile your hot action items. You need to turn these items into SMART goals. You need to tick off each one by Saturday, the 30th of May, so only in a few days' time, all while engaging your team and your community. Definitely reach out for support. You can reach out to your BD local reps or even me. I'm more than happy to assist you in any way I can, even if it's just for becoming enabled and then being ready. But most importantly, don't panic. Don't expect to get smashed with hundreds of patients from the get-go, and definitely mark it as done. So thank you all. Matt, let's jump to some questions.
Yeah, so there's one of the questions which is on here. Firstly, thanks for that, Zamil. I mean, I know from everyone else I've been speaking to just then, everyone's found that presentation really, really informative. So thank you for putting together a great presentation. But on here, one of the questions, and to everyone watching, you can upvote questions. So if you see a question on there and you really like it and you want to make sure it gets answered, you should be able to upvote those questions to make sure we see those as a priority. So one here, Zamil, from Scott is, I believe if a customer still wants to keep their repeats on file at the pharmacy can print off the repeat QR code / token and keep it on file and then scan the next time they require a repeat. Is this correct?
That is correct, depending on your dispensing platform. So for example, Minfos are definitely promoting that. However, my flip to you is that the patient must always be responsible for their QR code or token. So if that patient wants to go somewhere else, that they don't need that prescription now to come back to see you. So what other ways are you doing to engage that patient, to keep them coming to your pharmacy besides your script on file service? Are you engaging them with an app or other services and offerings? So the token itself, yes, can be printed off and dispensed at a later date, but at the end of the day, particularly with ASL rolling out in the future, that information will just be drawn from the cloud. So now's the time to remember that the token system is an interim measure. ASL is going to come out, and then you need to make sure that that patient is more loyal to you than a physical piece of paper.
Okay. And Zamil, a few other questions I've got here. Let me find one of these other ones. Yeah. We've got a question from Nathan. It says, does today's announcement mean that the 1st of June is no longer the kickoff day for most of us?
So depending, firstly, well, the whole process, I guess, starts with your prescribers. So what local prescribers are doing in your area, and if they themselves are eScript ready. Because if your prescribers aren't creating e-prescriptions, then you can't process e-prescriptions. So it's really important to find out what your local doctors are doing. So have a chat with your local doctors, see what they're doing. If they are going to be going ham on e-prescriptions from day one, which is pretty much 30th of May, then you need to be ready for it. Now, it all comes down to your dispensing system as well. So like I said, Minfos, Fred, and ZDispense are all definitely ready to go. If you don't use any of those three platforms, reach out to your dispensing software provider and make sure that they are eScript ready. So there's still some compliance things going on with some of the vendors that might delay them, but regardless, have a chat with your software vendor. But definitely aim to be ready by the 30th.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. And one other note I just want to point out really quickly is everyone watching, listening, we do understand we've just gone over time. So if you've got other things to go through and attend to, we understand. What we have done though is in the poll section, if you'd like to hear from Zamil, I think Zamil, you might follow up with an email or to the e-prescriptions, is that correct? Or
yeah, so if you need any support or need me to reach out to you, simply leave your details with your BD rep, or simply the information's on your screen. So feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn, Facebook, even Instagram, if that's your preferred social platform. You can send me an email, nice and easy, zamil@zamilsolanki.com, or give me a call, and I'll be more than happy to assist you.
Yeah, so you got his details there in the poll section as well. If you want to click yes to hear from Zamil, we'll connect the two of you there. That way you guys Zamil can exchange details with you. So one other question I've got here, Zamil, which I did prompt this person I would raise their questions, was have pharmacies considered how they will handle the change management aspects to their businesses, and are they going to conduct a risk analysis before implementation of e-prescriptions?
So this is what's going to set your pharmacy apart from others. Pretty much what I've discussed right now is a lot of planning. So planning, yes, risk management comes. Matt, can you clarify maybe what is meant by risk management in this context?
So all I've got here is the questions, Zamil. So what they've asked here, are they going to conduct a risk analysis before implementation of e-prescriptions? Look, I can't all I can elaborate from that, from my understanding of the question. If you can see the questions in the side there, it's from Brett, and was asked towards the start of the webinar. But from my understanding, it'd be around a risk analysis of e-prescriptions and how the pharmacy is potentially going to handle it and how they're going to look after that whole change.
So if we're looking at risk in terms of profitability, or the chance that you're going to become less profitable as a result of this, yes, that risk is very real, because that patient now no longer has a physical way to tie you to your pharmacy, particularly if you've got a very robust scripts on file business. So if you have got only a couple of hundred, you might not notice a significant difference. But if you're in the thousands with script on file business, then you need to ensure, and obviously you'd have a loyal customer base already, but between the next 3 to 6 months is now that time to build upon that and make sure that you can mitigate the risks. The big risks will come out from the launch of the ActiveScript list. So that in itself, paired with e-commerce platforms getting used by other big box retailers and home delivery services, will inadvertently drive patients away from your pharmacies, because that's the more convenient offering to them. So how are you going to be getting into the store? And now's the time to plan for those next 3 to 6 months.
I think that's a great way to answer that question there, making sure that you're ahead of the pack with that sense there. On here, Zamil, we've got a question saying, do patients still need to present at the pharmacy, to present the QR code? What if the patient wants to online or over the phone? So I think with that question, do the patients have to come into the pharmacy with their e-prescription, or can they do it over the phone or online?
Simply put, no. Essentially, the platforms that are currently rolling out right now are the patient can either SMS, send their prescription to you via an app platform, or email it to you, or remotely. So that will then soon integrate into third-party workflow tools such as MedView, the ZDispense's internal flows, and the app providers as well. So the short answer, no. The phone component of that is they can't phone it through. You need the physical token, either sent by SMS, app, or email.
Yep. And I reckon we pull out a couple more questions. Everyone still seems to be on the webinar, so I'm happy to go through a few more questions.
Sure.
Which ones have we got here? So this is one, it's a question asked by Tom, and I know we do have someone from Fred on the webinar, which I'm sure we can link them up here. But the question from Tom was, is Fred Next ready? I'm assuming that question is in relation to e-prescriptions, of course. So that's someone, I don't know if you can answer that, Zamil, or maybe
Yeah, to be honest, I can't at the moment. I would highly suggest that they are, given their involvement in the implementation of e-prescriptions. I would be quite surprised if they're not. But yeah, probably best to revert back to Fred on that one.
Cool.
Sure. Was there any other questions? Darren's just popped in the thank you so much, Darren. So Darren is from Fred, and he's just confirmed that Fred Dispense and Fred Next are both e-prescriptions ready. So thank you so much, Darren, for confirming that for us here. So Matt, looks like you might be frozen. Maria, can we just jump quickly to you? Matt's just going to quickly rejoin. So apologies about that.
Hi, Zamil.
Oh, there's Matt.
Um,
Alrighty, maybe time for one more question, Matt.
That's all right, because those numbers have started to drop as well. So let's see here. We've got a few questions that have been upvoted. There's this one here. How does it's just disappeared. How does MedAdvisor manage a patient's e-script? Do we know much about that there?
No, we don't know exactly the workflows, how that's going to be implemented at the moment. That would be something that definitely keep an eye on. A lot of the software vendors are working right now to automatically import. So once a patient actually receives that SMS from the doctor, a lot of the platforms now are actually allowing that data to be automatically captured and then imported directly into the app. That then will allow the patient to then order that medication through their app, similar to the current system. But I don't know when that's exactly going to be rolling out, but I do know that is in development with most of the app vendors at the moment. So it will grab the details directly from the SMS and input it directly into the app.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for attending tonight. We really appreciate you spending the last, I suppose, hour. We've gone over the last hour with us. One thing I wanted to raise as well with Zamil is that, look, Zamil, I know you mentioned and that you are part of the IPG group. Could you give a bit more information as to what's happening with that over the next week, that BD is sponsoring?
Yeah, sure. So I'm proud to be a co-founder and director with Karen Brown and Felicity Crimson of the Innovative Pharmacy Group. So this weekend we're hosting our virtual congress, which BD Roller are proudly supporting us with. If you're interested to learn more about that, feel free to reach out or jump onto innovativepharmacygroup.com.au to learn a little bit more about it. But essentially, it's 3.5 hours with 5 amazing speakers from all over the country, pretty much providing really practical and tactical ways to persevere and come out on top from this COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're keen to join us, we'd love to have you. Yeah, thanks, Matt.